Hello friends, welcome back. Kindly join me as I narrate my story. But before I proceed, please kindly hit the subscribe button, like, and share this video with your loved ones. Your support means the world to me. Now, to my story. My name is Olivia Grant, and for as long as I can remember, I truly believed that love could build anything. Stronger than ambition, deeper than pride. When Lucas and I exchanged vows 7 years ago, I was certain of that truth. He was brilliant, magnetic, and endlessly full of dreams. He used to talk about creating something grand, an empire that would one day make the world stand still in admiration. I could listen to him for hours. His words had energy, his presence had light. I often thought I was the luckiest woman alive. But there was one thing Lucas never knew. I came from wealth, real, generational wealth. My parents had built a vast investment empire, and when they passed, I quietly inherited it all. I managed those companies from the shadows, under other names, because I never wanted my fortune to define me. I wanted love that saw me, not the numbers in my account. So, when I married Lucas, I didn't tell him. I wanted to be the woman who believed in his potential, not the heiress who could fund it. When his small construction firm began to crumble under financial strain, watching him lose hope broke something in me. He poured everything into his dream, his time, his spirit, his heart, and I knew he was good at what he did. So I decided to help him quietly, in a way he would never trace back to me. Through one of my holding companies, I arranged for his business to win a major government infrastructure contract worth $400 million. He never suspected a thing. Every document, every signature, every transaction went through layers of intermediaries. When the news reached him, he burst through our front door like a child at Christmas, laughing, crying, holding me tight as he whispered, "Liv, I'll make you proud." I smiled and held him close, feeling his excitement pulse against me. Seeing him so alive made every hidden truth worth it. Months rolled by and his company skyrocketed. Investors hailed him as a visionary. Magazines clamored for interviews. Invitations to galas and exclusive dinners filled his calendar. He would come home reeking of champagne and cigars, wearing his success like a crown. At first, I was happy for him. I wanted him to enjoy every bit of it. I stayed quietly in the background, content knowing that, unseen, I had laid the foundation for everything he had become. But over time, I started noticing a change. He began dressing sharper. Custom suits, gleaming shoes, luxury watches that reflected the lights like stars. He changed cars 3 times in a single year. Conversations that once began with, "we," slowly turned into, "I." "People finally see my worth," he'd say over dinner, swirling his glass of red wine. "They're starting to realize what I can do." I would smile, whisper softly, "I've always known." He'd half smile, half nod, as though my words came from a memory he'd outgrown. Many times I wanted to tell him the truth, that he was living a dream I quietly built for him. But every attempt died on my lips. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was fear that he'd feel small. Or maybe it was love. The kind that endures in silence, that sacrifices without asking for thanks. At night, I'd watch him sleep, the faint glow from his phone reflecting across his face. I'd trace his fingers and remember when his hands held me like I was the only thing that mattered. Now, I felt invisible, like an extra in a movie that had forgotten my name. Lucas began traveling for business more frequently, weeks away at a time. When he called, his voice carried laughter that didn't sound real. "Everything's fine, Liv," he'd say. "Just busy, you know how it is." Yes. I knew exactly how it was. I knew the sting of distance, the weight of silence between 2 hearts that once spoke effortlessly. I knew what it felt like to sleep beside someone whose soul had already drifted somewhere else. One evening, after he left for yet another meeting, I sat on the balcony, watching the city lights shimmer like broken promises. Beautiful, but fading. I took a slow sip of wine and whispered to myself, maybe I gave too much. Maybe he was never meant to know. Still, deep down, I hoped. I hoped he'd find his way back. That one day he'd look at me and see not just his wife, but the woman who had silently carried his dreams. I didn't realize then that the same love that built his empire would soon ignite the fire that would destroy it. Success rarely arrives shouting. It slips in quietly, changing people in whispers before it begins to scream. With Lucas, it started. Subtly. Longer glances in the mirror, extra sprays of cologne, and new friends whose laughter never included me. He started dining with investors, socialites, and elegant women who spoke in voices smooth as glass. He said it was good for business. Perhaps it was, but it wasn't good for us. I tried to ignore it at first. I told myself marriage meant patience, trust, endurance through the noise. But each night, he returned later and later, smelling less like our home and more like someone else's perfume. I remember one night vividly. I sat at the kitchen island, dinner untouched, candles melted down to nothing. He walked in around midnight, scrolling through his phone, smiling faintly. "Hey, Liv," he said casually, his tone distant. "You didn't call," I whispered, my voice shaking slightly. He sighed, eyes still on his screen. "Oh, come on, Olivia. It was a long meeting. You know how these things go." "But it's happening a lot lately," I murmured. "I barely see you anymore." He let out a short, cold laugh. "You sound jealous." "No," I replied quietly. "I sound lonely." And that was the end of it. Silence, heavy and suffocating, filled the spaces words once lived in. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering how love can fade even when two people still share the same bed. His demeanor shifted in the weeks that followed. He began correcting me, my words, my clothes, my manners. "You should look more refined, Liv," he'd say before an event. "You don't quite fit in with this circle yet." I'd smile, pretending his words didn't sting, but inside, something fragile was breaking. I had stood by him through every storm, believed in him when no one else did. Now he seemed ashamed of the very simplicity that once drew him to me. He traveled more often, always accompanied by his assistant, Marcus, a kind man who treated me with careful sympathy. Sometimes he'd stop by to collect documents or apologize when Lucas forgot our anniversary or canceled a dinner. I saw the pity in his eyes, and I despised it. Even when Lucas was home, he was elsewhere, on his phone, on calls, replying to endless emails while I sat across from him in silence. Sometimes I'd catch him smiling softly at his screen, a smile that was no longer mine. At a charity gala one evening, I reached for his hand, but he pulled away discreetly, scanning the room. I followed his gaze and saw her, Samantha Reed, my best friend since college, radiant in a red dress that shimmered under the chandeliers. She waved at me, her smile warm, maybe too warm. I brushed it off, telling myself my heart was imagining things. Later that night, as I took off my earrings, Lucas came in humming, his tie loosened, cheeks flushed from champagne. "Sam looked incredible tonight, didn't she?" he said, half distracted. "She did," I replied, forcing a smile. "She's really come into her own," he added softly, almost dreamily. That was the first sharp stab of suspicion, but I buried it. I told myself Samantha was family, that Lucas would never cross that line. I threw myself into work, into anything that helped me hold on to sanity. Still, every time my phone buzzed, my heart hoped it was him. It never was. Months slipped away, and our home began to feel like a hotel suite, luxurious but hollow. He was rarely home, and when he was, his temper flickered easily. One night, I asked why he kept avoiding me. "Not everything's about you, Olivia," he snapped before storming off, leaving me with untouched food and a heart heavy with questions. That night, I went to my closet and stared at the hidden safe behind my dresses. Inside were the documents that proved who had truly built his empire. I opened it, pulled out the envelope, and almost tore it apart, ready to end the illusion, but I didn't. Not yet. A tiny spark of hope whispered that maybe love could still win. I closed the safe, sank to the floor, and wept quietly into my hands. Outside, thunder rolled across the city, as if warning me of storms I was no longer strong enough to stop. It was a Thursday afternoon, the kind that arrives with no omen. I had just come back from a lunch meeting when, On impulse, I decided to surprise Lucas. He'd been away so long, and I wanted to rekindle something. Anything that reminded us of who we once were. I stopped by a boutique, bought his favorite wine, and picked up pastries from that little French bakery he adored. I even slipped into the soft blue dress he once said made me look like spring. Our house was unusually quiet when I arrived. His car was in the driveway, which made me smile for a brief, hopeful moment. Maybe he came home early to rest. Maybe we'd have a peaceful evening for once. I unlocked the front door, humming lightly, but as I stepped inside, the air felt wrong, heavy, like a secret waiting to explode. Then I heard it, soft laughter echoing from upstairs. First I froze. It was a woman's laugh, light and familiar. My heart began to race as I climbed the staircase, my heels clicking against the marble in a rhythm that matched the pounding in my chest. I didn't want to believe it. Every step felt like walking toward the end of something sacred. When I reached our bedroom door, it was slightly open. My trembling hand pushed it gently, and there they were, Lucas and Samantha, my husband and my best friend tangled in sheets that still smelled like my perfume. For a moment, everything inside me went silent. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. I stood there, my heart turning into glass that shattered quietly inside my chest. Samantha gasped when she saw me, her face draining of color. Lucas jumped up, fumbling for words, the panic in his eyes, confirming what I already knew. "Olivia, wait," he stammered, reaching for his trousers. I lifted my hand to stop him, my voice trembling. "Don't, just don't. Please, it's not what you think," he said. I let out a broken laugh. "Really, Lucas? Then what exactly is it?" He looked lost like a child caught in alley. Samantha tried to speak, whispering, "Liv, I didn't mean for... Don't you dare!" I snapped, my voice suddenly sharp, foreign even to me. "You of all people, my friend, my sister." She tried to cover herself with the sheets, eyes brimming with tears. But I was done listening. I turned to Lucas, my voice low and steady. "You could have had anyone, Lucas. But you chose her. You chose betrayal." He moved closer, desperate. "It was a mistake, I swear. You was drunk. We were... Stop, cut him off again. Don't insult me with excuses." I stood there for a long moment, the wine bottle still in my hand, the dress I'd worn now feeling like a cruel joke. I looked at him, the man I once believed was my forever, and all I could feel was emptiness. Finally, I said quietly, "You know what hurts the most? It's not that you cheated. It's that I gave up pieces of myself to make you whole." I left the room before either of them could speak, again downstairs. I dropped the bottle of wine on the counter, watching it roll slightly before it stopped. My reflection in the glass looked like a stranger, tired, broken, but oddly calm. Minutes later, I heard Lucas's footsteps coming down. He was begging, pleading, trying to explain. I couldn't even look at him. I just said, "I need space, go." He hesitated before leaving. And when the door finally shut behind him, I collapsed onto the floor and sobbed until I couldn't anymore. The pain wasn't sharp. It was heavy, suffocating, like drowning slowly in memories that refused to let go. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window, staring at the city lights that once looked so beautiful. They blurred through my tears, turning into meaningless dots. I thought about every sacrifice I'd made, the secret deal, the years of quiet loyalty, the endless forgiveness, and I realized something brutal. Love without respect is just self-destruction in disguise. By morning, my tears had dried, replaced by a strange, cold determination. I walked to my closet, opened the safe, and stared at the envelope inside. The contract that had made Lucas everything he was. My fingers brushed the edges of the paper, and a quiet voice inside me whispered, "He doesn't deserve any of this." I closed the safe gently and exhaled. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of losing him. I had already lost him long before I opened that bedroom door. The betrayal was complete, but the reckoning, his reckoning, had only just begun. The next morning, I woke up feeling strangely calm. Too calm for someone whose world had just fallen apart. The tears were gone, the weakness too. All that remained was clarity and fire. Lucas had spent the night somewhere else. He'd called repeatedly, texted, sent voice notes filled with apologies and desperate pleas. I didn't respond to a single one. I just sat there drinking my coffee slowly as the reality of what I was about to do settled in my chest. 4 years I had been silent. I had built his empire quietly, sacrificed my peace, and swallowed my pride in the name of love. But that woman was gone. What stood in her place was someone reborn, someone who knew her worth. That afternoon, Lucas came home looking disheveled and pale. His eyes were swollen from crying. He dropped to his knees the moment he saw me sitting in the living room. "Olivia, please," he said, his voice cracking. "I made a horrible mistake. I can't lose you. I'll do anything, anything to make it right." I looked at him without emotion. "You've already lost me, Lucas." He crawled closer, trying to grab my hands, but I pulled away. It didn't mean anything, he continued desperately. You have to believe me. I don't even care about Samantha. It just happened. I was drunk, confused, stupid. I laughed softly, shaking my head. You were not confused when you kissed her. You were not drunk. Every other night you disappeared. You've been choosing other women over me for a long time. Samantha was just the final insult. He covered his face, groaning. Please live, don't do this. You're my life, my everything. You're everything, I said quietly. Funny because I was also your miracle once. You called that contract your life's turning point. Do you remember that? He looked up confused. What does that have to do with this? He stood up slowly and walked to the study. Lucas followed me, his voice trembling. Olivia, please talk to me. What are you doing? When I opened the safe and pulled out the thick folder of documents, his confusion deepened. I turned to face him, holding it out. Do you know what this is, Lucas? He frowned. That's the government contract. Why do you have it? I smiled bitterly. Because it was never from the government. It was from me. He blinked, stunned. What are you talking about? I am the reason you got this contract, I said, my tone steady. I used my company's influence. I signed every guarantee, moved every connection. You thought you earned it, but no. I gave it to you. His mouth fell open. You what? Yes, I said, tears glistening in my eyes, but my voice unshaken while you were sleeping peacefully. I was up all night making calls, pulling strings, and using my own money to make your dreams real. I believed in you, Lucas. Believed in us. And this, I held up the folder, is what you threw away for a few moments of lust. He took a step forward, reaching out. Liv, no, don't, please, we can fix this. I stepped back and dripped the first page. The sound of tearing paper filled the room like thunder. Lucas froze, his face draining of color. Olivia, stop! He shouted, his voice breaking. But I didn't stop. I tore the next one, then another. Faster and faster until the pieces scattered around me like confetti of betrayal. My heart pounded, my hands shook, but I kept going until the last sheet was nothing but fragments. Then I dropped them into the fireplace and struck a match. Flames caught quickly, curling the paper, devouring the ink that had once made him powerful. Lucas fell to his knees, screaming, No, Olivia, please. That's my company. That's everything. I watched the fire burn with cold eyes. No, Lucas, that was mine. You just didn't know it. He tried to reach into the fire, but I grabbed his arm sharply. Don't even try it. It's over. He collapsed beside the fireplace, sobbing like a child. I stood there watching him cry for everything he had lost. Not because of bad luck, but because of his choices. Finally, I said softly, you betrayed the one person who built you from the ground up. You don't deserve a fortune that was born out of my faith in you. Then I turned away, picked up my purse, and headed toward the door. Where are you going? He cried. To rebuild my peace, I said, without looking back. And this time, Lucas, I'll make sure no man ever uses my love as a stepping stone again. As I walked out, the smell of burning paper filled the air. A painful, poetic reminder that love built that empire and love had just reduced it to ashes. Days later, I sat in my lawyer's office signing the final divorce papers. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. I just signed calmly, deliberately, the same way I had once signed the documents that made Lucas a millionaire. Claire Dawson, my lawyer, glanced at me over her glasses. You're sure about this, Mrs. Grant? Completely, I said softly. I stopped being Mrs. Grant the day he chose to betray me. When I walked out of that office, the autumn wind felt different. It wasn't cold anymore. It was cleansing. I walked down the busy Manhattan street feeling lighter than I had in years. My marriage was over, yes. But so was the weight of pretending to be small so a man could feel big. By the end of that week, the news broke everywhere. Lucas Grant's $400 million contract abruptly canceled. Reporters surrounded his building. Investors fled. Partners withdrew. His company's stock plummeted in less than 48 hours. I didn't need to read the full articles. I knew exactly why it was happening. The anonymous investor behind that contract had officially pulled out. And that investor was me. Marcus Lee, his assistant, called me once. Mrs. Grant, I mean Olivia. Lucas is in really bad shape. He's been calling your old number nonstop. Tell him I wish him healing, I replied. But healing doesn't come from chasing the past. I hung up and never picked up again. Meanwhile, Lucas's downfall played out like a slow-motion movie across the business channels. He was photographed outside his office, looking thinner, haunted, completely broken. The same man who once strutted across corporate events in thousand suits now looked like a ghost of his former self. It would have been easy to feel satisfaction to think he got what he deserved. But I didn't. My heart wasn't vengeful anymore. I just wanted peace. So I disappeared quietly. No statements, no media, and no public explanation. I sold the penthouse, packed only what mattered, and flew to Santorini, a place I had always dreamed of visiting, but never did because Lucas said it was too romantic for just two people. The first morning there, I sat in a white balcony overlooking the sea, wrapped in a silk robe, a cup of cappuccino in my hand. The sunlight kissed my face. For the first time in years, I smiled without forcing it. Freedom, I realized, isn't about leaving someone. It's about finding yourself again. Weeks passed. I started sketching new business ideas, something that had always made me come alive. I had built companies before. I could build again, but this time not for anyone's approval. For me. Sometimes at night, I'd get quiet messages from old friends who'd seen the headlines. "Are you okay, Liv?" They'd ask. "Yes," I'd reply. "Better than okay." One afternoon, as I scrolled through the news, a headline caught my eye. "Lucas Grant declares bankruptcy after contract collapse." I stared at the photo. His once bright eyes were now tired, sunken. The story mentioned how he'd lost nearly everything. Assets frozen, investors gone, reputations shredded. Close the tab gently. There was nothing left to say. Months turned into a year. Life became calm again. My mornings were filled with ocean air and piano music. My evenings were spent on my terrace, watching sunsets that looked like art. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I whispered to myself. He never knew who I truly was, and that was the truth. Lucas never saw the billionaire in me, the strategist, the dreamer, the woman who built his success with quiet hands. He saw only what his pride allowed him to see, a wife he could outgrow. But I had outgrown him instead. Now, as I sailed across the Aegean Sea on my private yacht, I thought about how love could turn to ash and still leave behind something beautiful, strength. I looked back at the shoreline at the life I once had and smiled. "Goodbye, Lucas," I whispered. "Thank you for teaching me how to rebuild myself." The wind carried my words away, and with it, the last trace of the woman who once stayed silent for love, because now I was no longer the woman behind a man's empire. I was the woman who burned an empire to find her peace. And that, to me, was worth far more than $400 million. If there's one thing my story has taught me, it's that love without respect is a slow kind of death. I gave my heart, my trust, and my silence, thinking it was strength, but silence can sometimes be the loudest mistake. Lucas thought he made himself. He thought success was his doing, that I was just along for the ride. What he never realized was that every empire he built stood on my belief, my sacrifice, and my quiet support. I didn't destroy him out of hatred. I ended things out of clarity. Some endings are not revenge. They are rescue missions. So to anyone listening, never shrink yourself to make someone else feel tall. Never let love blind you to your own worth. And if someone betrays your faith, walk away with your head high. Not because you stopped caring, but because you finally started caring about yourself. My name is Olivia Grant, and this is how I found freedom in the fire.